Hello African gold growers, welcome back to a new interview. Today we have the honor of having with us Kal Kassa, an Ethiopian entrepreneur who advocates for the use of bitcoins to address many of the problems we face in Africa. His project is bitcoinbeer.org, an open source platform that provides simple explanations of what is Bitcoin and its applications in Africa. Additionally, he is the author of the Little Book of Bitcoin, initially published in Amharic and later translated into Afan Oromo and Tigrinya, all languages spoken in Ethiopia. Stay at the end of the video because you will find interesting answers and perspective from our guest today. Welcome, Kal. Thank you to be with us today. Well, African gold growers, how are you today? Welcome back to a new interview. Today we have the honor to have with us Kal Kassa. He's an Ethiopian entrepreneur. He is a Bitcoiner. He promotes Bitcoin in Africa, in Ethiopia specifically also. And he has a very interesting project called bitcoinbeer.org. So welcome, Kal. And if you can introduce a little bit of yourself, please.
Thank you for having me, Haile Jesus. It's great to be on, and thank you for providing a platform for people to talk about novel, interesting ideas like Bitcoin. I know you're a Bitcoiner yourself. That was a great introduction. I mean, I work in Bitcoin education. I try to share that with my community, with my audience, my friends and family. And the idea is, we have this novel technology, Bitcoin. We have the origin story of Satoshi Nakamoto, and we have all of the different problems and challenges to money that Bitcoin solves. So sharing education with Ethiopians, translating notable books and learning material into Amharic, Afan Oromo, and Tigrinya. And sharing that with the public. So thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to your show.
That's very interesting. Now, if Bitcoin is something really new to many African countries, maybe for Nigerians or another countries that have more access to this technology, but for the audience who don't know what is Bitcoin, how you can resume in short terms, what is Bitcoin?
Sure. Bitcoin is a permissionless money. So it allows you to access a wallet, as many wallets as you'd like, and allow you to undergo transactions to send sats, Satoshi, that's the name of the currency that's being used, to anyone in the world in a permissionless manner. So this uses public key cryptography. So the public key is used to receive Bitcoin, and while the private key is used to allow users to sign transactions. So this allows for, on the Lightning Network, almost instant settlement of your money, which is weeks ahead of what SWIFT and some of these banks can offer. They don't actually settle for 3 or 4 weeks, sometimes longer. But with the Bitcoin network, you have a public ledger that you can verify every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, you have blocks that accumulate onto the blockchain. Within each block, you have roughly 3,000 transactions. And regarding the amount of Bitcoin on the network, that is a fixed supply. So that's unlike our current system with the dollar and some of the other currencies around the world, where they have inflating properties because they have ever-changing supplies. So that's why you've seen the price of consumer goods go up, and we say there's an issue in inflation. But with Bitcoin, you have a fixed supply of 21 million Bitcoin, each being divisible into 100 million Satoshi. So think of that as cents to a dollar. It's just a smaller unit of account. And And so this is kind of the new money, the new digital currency that we've seen come in the past 10 years or so, or I'm sorry, 12 years or so. And so yeah, it's a very interesting technology. We've seen some adoption in Ethiopia, and so I've been following the story since about 2020 or so. That's when I kind of fell in through my own rabbit hole. And so yeah.
Yeah, Bitcoin is a new, very powerful technology. It's at the beginning it maybe is a little bit too complex to understand, but actually it's easy to when you disclose it. We need to read a little bit, but it's very powerful. So the next question I have for you, because you are an expert in promoting the adoption of Bitcoin, what are the main advantages of using Bitcoin in the African business environment?
Absolutely. So the main advantages is working in a permissionless network. So being able to move money without the permission of an agency or a bank or a government. And so, that will open so many doors for entrepreneurs and business people. And to see that medium of exchange is happening with an asset like Bitcoin that is non-inflationary. So again, we only have 21 million of these things. So the scarcity is always going to be there. And so that's kind of the main advantage for African entrepreneurs, business people, for them to retake or gain their wealth and their freedom for kind of monetary expression.
For example, it can be useful for the Zimbabwean entrepreneurs right now with the sanctions the USA's had over them. It's because
Absolutely.
they can pay with Bitcoin to the providers or to the customers, and they can send the products, the services, or whatever, because Bitcoin is not blocked by these kind of sanctions.
Oh yeah, Zimbabwe has a terrible currency. There, continually inflation rates are through the roof, hundreds of percent per year.
Yeah.
They've gone to actually removing their own national currency and instead using the USD within their country. And so, looking at something like Bitcoin is kind of a no-brainer for their people. And so I think, we'll see more Zimbabweans as well as, Africans in general move into holding and using Bitcoin.
Now, the next question will be, are there specific regulations regarding to the use of Bitcoin in Africa? How can entrepreneurs address these regulatory challenges?
Sure. So every country is going to have their own kind of unique set. I know in Ethiopia, there's kind of the governing body or the regulatory body. It's called the National Bank of Ethiopia. So, they have their own statements about, Bitcoin. I know each of the ministries have their own kind of stances and thoughts about Bitcoin. I think for a matter of commerce and doing business in Ethiopia, any crypto entrepreneurs will need to register with it's called INSA. It's kind of the Ethiopian version of the CIA or the NSA. So they ask that any businesses doing any business with Bitcoin register with their offices. That being said, I think Bitcoin has been able to grow without the need for regulation. So you don't. Whether the government is on board or not, I don't think that'll make much of a difference. And as has been said, everything is good for Bitcoin. So there's not much you can do to close down the network and close down the incentives for Ethiopians and Africans to participate in the network.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Well, the case of Ethiopia is really interesting because what I well, all the governments will try to maintain the centralization over the economy, but the how can we say it? Yeah, the line they are taking is because they are trying to prevent the use of Bitcoin to bad things, like by this kind of destabilizations groups. But I think, as you say, they cannot do much over them because it's totally free. Bitcoin is totally free. It's the first time in human history that we can use a currency per equals. So everyone can use it. So I think it's really powerful. This is the secret and the power of Bitcoin, actually.
Absolutely. And like you said, there is a lot of fear from the side of government, and I think in Ethiopia we have closed capital markets, so the controls are extremely high, to where the black market or the free market is where the majority of transactions are happening. So so the because the regulations are so high in transacting using the US dollar, it's created a premium for the US dollar. So that also creates a premium for Bitcoin. So there's actually a, the price of one Bitcoin in Ethiopia is actually a lot higher than the price of one Bitcoin in the United States, because, receiving the USD is such a nightmare, right? You have to go into kind of the back alleys and the black markets. And so, whether the government, allows for this or not, there's always going to be demand there.
Now, you mentioned about some entrepreneurs that are using Bitcoin, or they have to register to the agency, the security agency of Ethiopia. So if you can tell us about some examples of entrepreneurs using Bitcoin in Ethiopia.
Sure. So the largest, I think, right now is going to be a mining facility that's opening up before the end of the year. They're called QRB Labs. And they're going to start off with 7,000 miners in Ethiopia, and they'll be hosting on behalf of clients around the world. But they are going through this kind of licensing right now, and so we'll see them very shortly start to do business in Ethiopia, and I think there will be many more that follow, purely because the cost of doing business in Ethiopia is very cheap, right? It's very advantageous for the investors, whether it's land or human resources, labor, and also the price of electricity. It's about 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So all of these things will move different miners into Ethiopia, so we'll create a larger hash rate using Ethiopian energy.
This is really powerful. Yeah, because actually Ethiopia will be the new super electricity power, at least in Africa and in a very big part of the world, with the GERD.
Yeah, so, with the GERD, the hydropower, it's a renewable source. And so, I think, and the GERD isn't the only dam, although it's the largest, 6,000 megawatts. I think there's about 10 other dams along the Nile, called the Gilge Gilbez. So, Ethiopia's source of energy will allow for things like this to happen.
Will be very interesting to watch this new environment over the time. So jumping to the next question, how can Bitcoin, from your perspective, how can Bitcoin help to overcome financial and infrastructure challenges in Africa?
Sure. So, well, it first of all removes the need for a lot of other types of infrastructure. So because you don't need trusted third parties payment processors or banks, clearinghouses, things like this. It removes the need for that type of investment. And so, physical bank branches, ATMs, importing banknotes. So the Ethiopia, I think I have some Ethiopian currency somewhere around here, but all of those, uh, pieces of paper, the security printing is actually done in Europe. I believe it's done in the United Kingdom. It's a big investment, right? And that in itself requires dollars, right? Often dollars that we're borrowing from kind of the international institutions. So it first removes the need for that type of infrastructure building. Um, Two, it sets a better precedent for remittance. So, Ethiopia, Africa, a lot of the developing world or the global south, they earn hundreds of millions, at times billions, if you're counting the kind of the black market inflows a year through remittance channels like Western Union, right? Now, Western Union, they're going to be taking 8%, 10%, 12% of that transaction. So moving to a Bitcoin standard, you're looking at, less than 1%, if that, right? And so removing the need for that will allow, all of your capital to flow into, your country, your family, your friends, whoever it is that you're sending that money to. And it also saves on, some of these SWIFT networks and, banking networks, payment processors. They have, fees that are extremely high for, the African consumer. And so that's why there's, there's not a lot of overlap between African institutions and Western institutions. So an objective rule set allowing agreement and truth to be verified on a block chain every 10 minutes. A public ledger really kind of fights these systems and allows people to transact freely and amongst their peers without the messy intermediaries in the middle.
Powerful, powerful. Yeah, will bring a lot of improvements in Africa in general, as you say. To be honest, I never thought before about what you said of the black market, but it's totally true, because if you have this free transaction, this free movement of the money, uh, the price will be put it by the market, and will take down a lot of problems of the national economy. And I think this problem happens in many countries of Africa, or as you said, in the global south. It's starting to happen in Mexico right now, for example, because it's bringing a lot of dollars from the outside.
Absolutely.
So it's a big solution. So, what are the most common use cases of Bitcoin among African entrepreneurs in your experience?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a great store of value. So instead of moving any of your personal savings or your company's treasuries into local currency or dollars, moving it into Bitcoin is smart for the long term. It's a great medium of exchange, like I had already kind of explained. Without any trusted third parties, you're able to meet with that party and settle a transaction almost instantly and at a very low cost. And then Bitcoin has a development layer, so there are kind of educational initiatives like Kala, and so they are a group that I think they're on their second cohort of students now, but they're teaching technical Bitcoin. They're teaching developers and programmers to develop on Bitcoin. And so, we'll see we'll see larger marketplaces for Bitcoin. So, right now you have apps like Bitrefill, which allow you to buy Ethio Telecom credit
Wow.
using your sats. So you can do that right now. There's two simple steps that you have to kind of fill out. But using your sats, you can buy telecom credit. And then, of course, Bitcoin as a means of energy and mining. So those two are going to come hand in hand. So we'll see more development around that space.
Wow, I didn't know about this application. This is interesting. This is interesting. And do you know the cases of DAOs or something like this now in Africa?
No, I think right now what I'm looking at is things like Fediment,
Hmm.
which Fedi is a company that's going to be taking advantage of this Fediment protocol,
Hmm.
allowing for federated custody. So that'll allow entrusting your funds instead of doing it to a kind of an unknown third party. You could store funds with community leaders or guardians that you know and trust. So those type of kind of community engagements and new ways of taking custody, I think, are going to be interesting. They'll allow for some sort of voting amongst members or amongst the guardians, and so that's what I'm looking at. And I think generally there's going to be a lot of kind of uptick in businesses using Bitcoin. I know in South Africa, Pick and Pay, it's kind of like Mercado Libre or a Walmart
Mm.
or what have you, but they have more
Like
than
Jumia.
1,600. I'm sorry.
Like Jumia.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
This is actually a physical store. So Pick
Mm.
and Play, Pick and Pay, they have kind of grocery stores and retail stores all over
Ah,
South
okay.
Africa, more than 1,600, and they are now accepting Bitcoin. So there's also another project called btcmap.org, where hundreds of retailers across Africa have listed their services and their locations, and they are also accepting SATs. So, I think we'll continue to have these kind of movements take place.
Yeah, this website you mentioned it is we were registered there when we had the restaurant, and
Okay.
only two people asked for payments of Bitcoin, but well, we were registered there.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
well, I want to ask you in inside of this same question. I know the answer because I watched your interviews. But what about real estate? Can you buy, purchase, or sell houses or rent houses in Africa or in Ethiopia using Bitcoin?
So I've been asking this question in Ethiopia. The answer was no, not yet. That being said, I'm sure you can find someone that is willing to make that transaction and change your Bitcoin for dollars or for the local currencies.
Currency.
So there are marketplaces, but there aren't property developers that are taking Bitcoin. But I'm sure you can find some market for that Bitcoin, or work with some type of banker to make that exchange possible.
Well, we can resume from your answers of this inside of this question that this is a challenge, yes, in Africa, but actually it's a big blue ocean of opportunities.
Absolutely. Big blue ocean of opportunities. Yeah, you have a billion and 300 million living in Africa, right? The majority of them being young. I think 70% under the age of 28 or so. And so these, are naturally going to be digitally native. They're going to know how to kind of use smartphones on a day to day. And even for your consumers that don't necessarily have a smartphone, there are companies like Machankura that have integrated the Lightning Network using USSD,
Mm.
which is a protocol for mobile money that allows you to data less, and that basic phones will become just as smart now. So you'll be able to send and receive Bitcoin with those simple dumb phones or those simple Nokias. And so as we see things like that move throughout Africa, I think they're available in about 5 or 6 African countries now. We're going to see more of that. I think it'll be a success story for Bitcoin.
Super interesting, super interesting. Well, the entrepreneurs or the African gold growers who are watching us can go inside, make more research, and they can find a lot of opportunities of this uh, uh, industry, like Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
What are the key security considerations when using Bitcoin for business in Africa?
Sure. I would encourage anyone to store their Bitcoin in a hardware wallet. Keeping those keys private and offline, I think, is a good thing. And setting up, two-factor, 2FA, two-factor authentication on your phone and computer device, I think, is also a good thing. So those are going to be your basic kind of security considerations to take. And using, of course, self-custody or non-custodial wallets to ensure that there isn't any risk of a third party messing up somewhere and that impacting your wallet.
Okay, perfect. For the people who don't understand what is a hard wallet, in the blockchain universe or in the Bitcoin, is when you have a series of words that you put in a specific order, so it allows you to open your wallet. But if you don't have them, you don't have access to your wallet. So what is called telling us is you have your keys right literally on paper, literally in a safe place outside of the network of offline. So you have a self custody of your keys. When you listen in the news that was an account of Bitcoin or of a cryptocurrency hack, normally what is happening is an exchange. Okay, an exchange is a website where people is making transactions between cryptocurrencies, but not directly on the blockchains of Bitcoin. Bitcoin have never been hacked, so this is why it's so important. Follow the advice Kal is giving us.
Absolutely. And I think earlier I said something about Bitcoin being 10 or 12 years old. Actually, it's much older. So 2009 is, or 2008 to 2009 is when you have that Genesis block. So it's much older.
Yeah. So how can African entrepreneurs use Bitcoin as a tool for financial inclusion in unbanked communities?
So, first I would encourage everyone to become a net producer. So whether you're an individual or an organization, a business, a country, you need to produce more than you consume. So, staying out of unproductive debt is a good start. Spend much less than you earn. Stay disciplined when it comes to your finances. So start there, and create a kind of a culture of saving and thinking in the long term. So become low time preference. So value tomorrow more than today, as it comes to when it comes to saving for your finances. And then I would say dollar cost average. That's the best way for Africans to use Bitcoin as a tool. So whether it's every week, every 2 weeks, every month, every paycheck, however it works out, dedicate a small amount of, depending on your comfort level, a certain amount or a specified amount of Bitcoin, and deposit that into a self-custodial or a non-custody wallet. So, I think these are just basic steps that you can take, and over the long term, over just a few months, you'll start to see your account grow, and so retaining value for the future really is that easy, but it does take discipline and kind of, personal responsibility to get there.
Super interesting. It remembers me the stories I listened from older people in Ethiopia who survived during the dark because they had the habit to keep gold before the revolution. So a lot of people, and I think happens in other countries in Africa, the elder people used it to keep gold. So when the bad times came, they could survive selling this gold because the price increased. So it's exactly the same with Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is transportable because it's literally in a piece of paper with your wallet or in a USB. So, but the principle that is called telling us is exactly the same. Bitcoin is going to increase along the time. You need to have a perspective in long term. So you are saving money for the long term, and you will always be watching an increase of the value of your savings. Now, I think, well, it's another perspective also that is necessary to improve the network in Africa, but maybe in the future, or we are watching some examples also, for example, in Nigeria, in Tanzania, where the people is having access to payments in long distance using Bitcoin, uh, but they don't need a succursal, a bank succursal of the people don't have to go directly to the bank to make these deposits. So probably it will be an improvement along the time in the environment. Do you think it?
Yeah, I do think that, there'll be improvements there. When it comes to telecom networks, most African countries have been making more investment. The cost of telecom has gone down in Ethiopia a considerable amount. We now have competitors building out Safaricom. So not only does Ethio Telecom, the government-owned service provider, provide telecom services, but we've now allowed Safaricom to do the same. And I think there's going to be a third business license that'll be tendered soon. So as we have more competition, the prices of these services will keep going down, and they'll, be expanded into more kind of pockets of the economy. And so, as that happens, more Ethiopians will be digitally native, and they'll have, the ability or the tools to send and receive Bitcoin. So, obviously, Nigeria has taken a very early lead in this. South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, these are all countries that have taken the lead. But I think the Ethiopians will quickly catch up.
Well, what is the current state of Bitcoin adoption in Africa, in your perspective?
I think it's good. I think there's been a lot of growth. Although starting from a low base, and this growth is going to come into mining. It's going to come into marketplaces. You have countries like the Central African Republic. About 2 years ago, they were looking at making Bitcoin a legal tender. They were also studying a cryptocurrency called Sango. They later kind of stepped back from that position, but they too are kind of realizing that their current currency isn't doing them any good, and so them studying Bitcoin, I think, is a very kind of positive step. I think Mackenzie Signalos from the CNBC, she was at the African Bitcoin conference last year. And she had produced a great article about how Bitcoin is posed to blow up, Africa's $86 billion banking sector, right, or system. So, what is now, mainstream media or popular media, telling the same stories that Bitcoiners have been telling for years now, over a decade now. I think, there's some consensus and there's some kind of greater truth towards this. So yeah, I think the state of adoption is going well, and I think we'll only see more participants in the Bitcoin network, and so yeah, I'm excited to see countries, follow in the footsteps of El Salvador. But even if they don't, the people are gravitating towards this idea. And so we'll have more developments and more applications involving Bitcoin.
Yeah, actually, that you mentioned it, I think the adoption is better in Africa, taken as a whole, than, for example, in Latin America. Now that I live in here in Mexico and I visited Argentina and I'm watching, yeah, the environment is growing here in Latin America because we have a lot of challenges, we have a lot of problems because the fiat money, because the US, the dollar standard. But I think it's faster in Africa because the needs and the challenges are bigger. So the people is searching for solution and they are finding a big hope opportunity or big hope tool inside of Bitcoin. So I think it's an environment that will grow a lot, as you said, and entrepreneurs put attention to this. I think it's a huge opportunity to make businesses, to use as a tool to build solutions around Bitcoin, to use your creativity as big as you can.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's very exciting. We're kind of I think still in the early days, but yeah, for me, it's been kind of a very novel, interesting idea. And so, reading about it, learning about it, and sharing what I know and what I've learned has been very valuable and rewarding for myself.
Now, the last question about Bitcoin and specifically, why Bitcoin? Okay, or which are the alternatives? Because we listen a lot of cryptocurrency, and now more recently about the CBDCs. Why Bitcoin? And which is the difference with the alternatives?
Sure. So Bitcoin exists in a completely decentralized system. The opposite of that would be a centralized or a company-led or an organization-led or a country-led money. And instead, Bitcoin has no leaders. It has rules, but no rulers. After its kind of genesis, it was allowed to breed in the free market, and it uses proof of work, which is superior to proof of stake. And so having those qualities, as well as the quality of having a supply capped at 21 million, having the halving coming in, so that there are less Bitcoin being rewarded to the miners, adding an additional scarcity. I think all of those things will ensure that Bitcoin is really has no alternatives. And so for me, it's a very novel idea of turning this kind of kinetic energy into digital energy and moving that through space. I think is much more superior than a company-led or an entrepreneur-led currency. And we've kind of seen this conclusion come true, as you've had the different exchanges, or I think they call them shitcoin casinos, because they've given these altcoins a platform to sell and promote and market themselves, and they get into kind of different leveraged returns and staking and all of these things that really are not good forms of money, right? They're a great way to gamble, right? But it really doesn't lead to a strong production or a strong ethics of money. So yeah, for me, Bitcoin is the answer. I don't really see the others as alternatives. There really is no alternative when it comes to Bitcoin, in my opinion.
Do you see another blockchains as an alternative for NFTs? That is a totally another topic, but it's a very powerful tool, also NFTs. Or do you think it's a good idea to maintain this technology like NFTs inside of the Bitcoin blockchain?
I really haven't done my homework when it comes to NFTs.
Hmm.
I understand, a lot of artists love it. They love being able to, show their work on a, public ledger of some sort. And so, whether that's on, Bitcoin or others, I really have no opinion when it comes to that.
Okay.
So, I'll leave that for the NFT enthusiasts and for the artists to contribute.
Okay. Well, so jumping to this was the last question about the Bitcoin from your expertise. Now talking about yourself, if you can tell us a little bit about bitcoinbear.org and your project, and which one has been your challenges in this Bitcoin world as an Ethiopian entrepreneur.
Sure. So, the work is really, how many rooms and audiences and stages can I get invited into, and
Mm-hmm.
how many people can I orange pill? And maybe orange pilling is the wrong, but if I can introduce Bitcoin from a perspective of Saifedean Ammous or Jimmy Song or Andreas Antonopoulos, then things are a little bit easier to comprehend, instead of it coming from a perspective of number go up, or this kind of very volatile investment, purely looking at kind of the foundations of the protocol and of the token within the network. So challenges, I would say, well, in any African country, there are, um, customs, or there are ways of doing business, and things might seem, there's a lot of dogma, right, when it comes to our institutions and our businesses. So, but thankfully, there are very young people in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, 70% being under the age of 27. Even those in, government offices and the officials are young. And so they've, I think, at least given me an ear. I've been able to host, lectures with hundreds of people in the room, and share that on YouTube. So all of those things have been, I'm very fortunate to have been able to do that. But those challenges are still there, and so hopefully I can inspire more people to kind of learn about it, share about it, and there'll be kind of an exponential effect throughout the years. And so yeah, some challenges, but for the most part, it's been a great opportunity and great acceptance. I've probably been on a few dozen stages by now, and so far so good.
And your rewards as entrepreneur? Which one has been your
Uh,
biggest rewards in this process as entrepreneur?
Rewards as an entrepreneur. I mean, so living in Austin has been great in that, I'm right next to a lot of the entrepreneurs and a lot of the kind of the builders in the space. I've met fantastic kind of advocates for Bitcoin, great kind of human rights advocates in Bitcoin. So, the community and kind of the enthusiasm around this space, I think, is very novel, and it's very interesting to see. And I've had a chance for a lot of good reception, especially around my work around Cardano, and exactly why that's not kind of a good place for Ethiopians to store their digital IDs,
Okay.
and so yeah, a lot of good kind of rewards in that sense, and price appreciation, right? So I'm a part of the DCA crew, so I dollar cost average every time I have a paycheck, and so that of course has been great for kind of taking back my own sovereignty.
Nice. Uh, which could be a good advice you can give to the entrepreneurs who are watching us?
I would say, think long term. Don't look at the projects that are, have that, hype or that buzz for the next few weeks or months, but really think about, money over the course of decades and perhaps generations, and think about the kind of money that will exist then. And once you have that low time preference mindset, things will kind of naturally lead you into hard money, intangible money like Bitcoin. And so, I think that's the best advice I can give. Learn as much as you can. Try to build if you are, within the tech space, and of course, hold Bitcoin.
Super nice. I think not only for Bitcoin or for any part of your project, this is a very an excellent advice. Think in the long term, because we have a big challenge in this generation and in this time that we are living, that everything is in the short term. Everything is immediately. So our brain is losing this capacity to think in the long term, to think over 3 months or 1 year. So we need to recover this patience. We need to recover this perspective in the long term, in the saving money, in the course of your project, in your personal life, in any part of your life in general, or in your projects as entrepreneur. Think in the long term, I think, is a very, very nice advice. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Lastly, uh, I think that you will like to know at the beginning of the journey. So if you can talk with the call of the beginning of this journey, which kind of things do you would like to know at that moment?
Hmm. Well, I would have steered clear from a lot of the tokens and coins that I was involved with, when I first got into Bitcoin, or when I first kind of entered the rabbit hole. So just, sticking to Bitcoin is really the only advice I can give. Stick to Bitcoin, get a hardware wallet, a dollar cost average every day. Be consistent about it. Be disciplined about it. And so that's what I would advise myself. I would have saved myself a few weeks, a few months of agony, kind of reading different books and going through different forums that really weren't helpful. Instead, they were kind of treating me as some sort of sales funnel, right? Paying for education should never be something that anyone does, purely because there are so many free courses online. So Sailor Academy, for anybody that needs kind of a free introduction into Bitcoin, that's a good way to go. And a lot of these books you can find on Amazon, whether it's Saifedean Ammous or Andreas Antonopoulos and Jimmy Song and the rest. So stick with Bitcoin. Try not to pay for education. There's a ton of free material online already, and dollar cost average in a very disciplined way.
Internet is the new university.
Right, that's right. I mean, YouTube, plenty of podcasts, Coursera. There's so many places you can go for free education. I believe even MIT publishes a lot of their introductory kind of blockchain courses on YouTube as part of kind of an open source initiative. So the things you'll find on GitHub, the PDFs that you'll find on the internet will support your education, and so you don't really need to pay any gurus. There aren't experts. There aren't leaders in this field. You simply start at the white paper and you go from there.
Yeah, totally agree. When I was in the university, in the vacations, or when I had not classes because the teacher were making researches or whatever, I used to take online courses in Coursera and EDX, and was super useful for me. It's super
Absolutely.
useful.
Absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely.
well, the last two questions. The first one is from my dad. He want to ask if you take advantage from the down in 2019.
So in 2019, I was still oblivious for the most part, and so no, I didn't take advantage of that. There still was some growth to be had in early to mid 2020, so I did take advantage of that. And so, and I do want to credit, Jack Dorsey in 2019. He had come into Ethiopia just a few weeks before Corona had hit. So this was like December or January following that year, and he made a great point to talk about Bitcoin and open source technology. I got onboarded just a bit after that, but yeah, I'm sure some Ethiopians did, and yeah, I'm thankful for him to kind of have introduced and red pilled, or I'm sorry, orange pilled a lot of Ethiopians.
Nice, interesting. Well, he will be. Thank you with the answer. The last question is about. I see in your social media this and that. You don't are very agree with Cardano. You know the Cardano project that is another for the who don't knows. Cardano is another blockchain. It's another can call it a cryptocurrency. For the Bitcoiners, only Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. The other ones is altcoins. But well, it's a cryptocurrency. It's a blockchain. You can make transactions with ADA, that is the coin, and you can keep information with in the blockchains in NFT forms. But I see you constantly are not so much agree with Cardano. I want to ask you why. To put the people who are listening us in context, the Ethiopian government, the Ghanaian government, and other African countries are making agreements with Cardano to put the information in their blockchain. Specifically, in the case of Ethiopia, we are half, we are Ethiopians, Kal and me. So the Ethiopian government wants to put in the blockchain the information from the students and the teachers, and they want to make another improvements in another ID licenses. So the question directly is why you are not so much agree with it.
Sure. So, I mean, why I don't agree with it is, simply speaking, they're using Ethiopia. It's almost a kind of affinity marketing, right? So they come in and they take photos and they kind of announce these very large projects, and you can see them shaking hands with ministers and so on. But really, there's nothing happening on the ground in terms of implementation, and they're using that story as a way to hype and market and promote their token in more developed countries. So, with regards to Ethiopia, Cardano came into Ethiopia around 2018. So, 5 years now. And there has been no implementation of any technology. So there isn't any,
Improvement.
capturing or improvement. Or, yeah, and one, you don't want a private foreign company, responsible for something like that. You probably want to leave this to someone within your country. There are already tools. I think Microsoft has a DID, a decentralized ID a protocol called ION. India uses it, and they've had great success with it. So it's really not a tool that Ethiopia needs. Even if and now after 2018, you've had national ID come about. So that's ID.et. So that's an Ethiopian solution for digital ID. So one, it's a completely nonsensical. Nobody asked for this tool. There was no tendering process. There was no kind of competition amongst service providers. If there were, there would be a lot easier and faster ways to do this. And so they're purely using this story of 5 million kids on the on the Cardano blockchain as a marketing exercise. I mean, think about the actual intensive data collection that would need to go on to go find 5 million Ethiopian kids and capture their fingerprint or and so do we want that to occur, right? And so I don't think I know I don't, and so yeah, this has kind of just been a kind of a marketing gimmick, and in the meantime they've been promoting their tokens. I think at some point it was $3 a token. Now it's fallen below 30 cents or 25 cents or what have you. And I think here is where the story ends, because the SEC, the regulators in the United States, are saying the token qualifies for, I think it's the Howey test, which distinguishes whether something is a security or not. And it looks as though ADA token is a security, right? You're essentially buying into the company, buying a share of the company, and they're doing all of this in an unregulated fashion with exchanges like Binance and Coinbase, right? So although I'm not a fan of regulation, I think we're simply seeing what needs to happen, which is have these kind of altcoins be labeled for what they are, and so we'll see less of their presence in Ethiopia and other countries for the future.
Interesting. I have never watched it from that perspective, but you are totally right. They have a lot of time inside of Ethiopia, and they have no change, nothing literally. I mean, at the beginning when I started listening about them, I was like exciting, like wow, they are bringing this technology directly to the government. But yeah, after the time, they didn't nothing actually. So I didn't watch it from that perspective, because yeah, for example, we are watching for Safaricom. They have only 1 year and they are making a lot of improvement, and the capital, it's huge, bigger, but they optimize a lot of how they are using the resources. There are a lot of other companies that are making literally miracles inside of Ethiopia or in other African countries, just optimizing the resources they have, but having a truly perspective of what they want to achieve. So it's possible to make the change, and they have not make so much in there. Yeah, I didn't watch it from that perspective, but I agree with you. The last question, this will be right now the last question, something that you want to ask us.
Something I want to ask you. So what's the kind of Bitcoin adoption look like in your community in Mexico? Have you seen different retailers, service providers in your area accept Bitcoin? Do you have Bitcoin meetups? So yeah, what's your answer on that?
Well, here like Mexico or like African gold growers?
Both.
Oh,
So
both of them?
maybe tell me, tell me about your community in Mexico, as well as your African global or African growth growers. Is that right? African Gold Growers Academy.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, in the African Gold Growers Academy, we are making this little by little promotion, like this interview we have with you. This is the first time we have the honor to talk with an expert like you. So the idea is to promote more the adoption of Bitcoin, because we also believe it's a big solution for many African problems. It's not the one solution, but it will improve a lot of things of Africa. We are truly sure of that. In my personal case, yes, I'm a Bitcoiner. I have some Satoshis, keep it in my wallet. But specifically, I discovered in a process from my last trip to Ethiopia in 2018. As I was telling you, I was very shocked by many social things I watched there, contrast that I live here in Mexico, and I start to read about economics, about sociology, and there hit the pandemic in 2020, and I started to read a lot of economics, and I found Bitcoin. In this process that I found Bitcoin, I tried to start making promotion of Bitcoin also with my customers in the restaurant here in Mexico. And I discovered, for example, here in Mexico City is a restaurant called Bitcoin Bar Embassy. They make a lot of promotion of Bitcoin in all Latin America. They make meetings. You can pay there with Bitcoin. It's very interesting. There I discovered some other little entrepreneurs here. In my city are 3 places: a dentist, doctor, a guy who sell, remote control airplanes, like drones and these kind of things, and scale airplanes. He also received Bitcoin. You can make an exchange peer-to-peer with him. It's very near from a restaurant, was like 3 blocks, And I started to discover some places around the country in Mexico. Very few people, very, very few people. But the community is growing little by little because of the pandemic. People start watching, why is the inflation so high? Why the money is losing value so fast? What is happening with the world? So the people start aware of this kind of problems. They discover Bitcoin, and I think it's in a good way. But we have long time to go, because also the central government is not so much happy with this kind of ideas, because they want still to have the control. But little by little, the people is being more aware of it. I am enthusiastic about it. The other technology that I'm not an expert. The expert in NFTs is my dad. He studied a lot of NFTs, and it's another technology inside of the blockchain that I'm very enthusiastic, because the possibilities that we can do with it, not only in the artistic way, but for example, to give you an example, the Ghanaian government is making an improvement with the land owners. So now with the new regulation, they are putting your land title, what we call in Ethiopia the lease, inside of the blockchain. So is no corruption possibility there, because in the blockchain is right that you, Kal Kassa, are the owner of this piece of land, and Haile is the owner of this piece of land with GPS coordinates. So nobody can move it. So there is no paper where you can have the possibility of corruption. And for example, the idea of my dad is to build a business using NFTs as an investment possibility, So people can buy like stocks from the business using NFTs. So in my personal life is where we are more involved. I think Bitcoin is right now so much more stable in the global environment, because the people is more aware. So we can watch the price more stable than ever. And I think here in Mexico, for example, the people is little by little, the people who is inside of the community is more aware of this power that Bitcoin has. So they are not just selling and buying according to the market, with this FOMO and that. I watch a more mature culture inside of the Bitcoin environment. But it's still, as I told you, very few people in the country. I mean, maybe less than 1% of people. I mean, the biggest YouTuber about Bitcoin and NFTs in the Hispanic world, I mean, Spain and all Latin America, has 200,000 followers. So it's nothing actually. But they have a strong community. They built something really interesting. But this is still young. My dad and me, we say it's still a baby. This community.
I think you're onto a great start. And even when I was in Ethiopia, one of the offices that invited me to speak was the Land Bank and Development Corporation, I think is the name of their office. And so they had me in, but I think you're onto something as it relates to, having, records that are, immutable, right? That's a term I hear a lot, and having that applied to property records, I think, can be a solution. So I'd be interested to learn about that from you. But hey, I think you're onto something, and as this community and as these tools grow, it'll be interesting to look at them from kind of an African lens and support the adoption.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, this is how it's working right now, or my perspective in here in the Bitcoin environment in Latin America. How we see it.
Very cool, very cool. And you said it was a Bitcoin Embassy Bar. Was that the name
Bitcoin Embassy Bar. Yeah, Mexico City. I will send you by. I will write the name here in the subtitles, but I will send you the name of or the link from the Instagram fan page.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I love to see it, and you're not too far from me. I'm in Texas right now, so maybe there's a chance for me to come out there one day and meet
Yeah.
some of the community members.
Yeah. They actually have a Bitcoin ATM inside of the bar. It's really interesting. They have
Very cool, very cool.
the whole environment is about Bitcoin. They sell ledgers for the people who is watching us. It's a small USB where you can keep your seed keys, your wallet inside secure. They sell ledgers. You can pay with Bitcoins. You can go to conferences. You can promote your NFT art there. A lot of things. Really interesting. Really interesting. And if you pay with Bitcoin, they give you the 15% less discount because you are not paying the taxes.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Or the transaction fees and the payment processor fees.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is how it's working here. I think she is the biggest promoter here in Mexico. Actually, Lorena is the name of the owner of the bar.
Okay, I'll have to give them some publicity.
Well, Kal, thank you very much for this interview. I think it was very useful. We hope our community enjoy it. I think our community will learn a lot, and maybe we can have another conversation in the future to talk about some other depths that probably the community will have. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise with us.
Thank you. Pleasure was all mine, Haile Jesus. Thank you for having me on your program, and anytime. If there's anything that I can add value on or contribute, feel free to send me a link, and I'd love to be on your program again.
Okay, thank you very much.